Evening, everyone. Good evening to all those on Zoom. Nice to have you here. I want to dedicate this talk to Donald Trump. It's on the theme. It's the first of the 8 awakenings of enlightened beings on having few desires. And I'm going to give the next series of talks will be on one after another of these. So the first, we begin with having few desires. Looking into that. Not chasing after the object of one's desires is called the having few desires. So not chasing after the object of one's desires. This is where freedom lies. Dogen's he dedicated the last of his fascicles on the precepts to this particular one. And he says, the Buddhas are great people. What a great person understands is called the 8 awakenings of great people. Understanding these teachings leads to nirvana. They are the final instructions of our original master, the Buddha, Shakyamuni, delivered at midnight before he entered parinirvana. So these awakenings were the last of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, which says something about how important they are to make it part of our own practice. So the first of the last things that the Buddha taught is having few desires. And these are his words, according to the mythic recording in the Pali Canon. Here's something you need to be aware of. A person with many longings or cravings suffers proportionately greater because he or she seeks greater personal gain or benefit. When one pursues few desires, there will be less suffering and fewer troubles. Personally, having fewer desires needs to be thoroughly studied and practiced. Moreover, not following those cravings engenders unaccountable merit. And merit means generally blessings. Actions that gather protective and strengthening energies toward us. A person with few cravings will never try to flatter or ingratiate themselves with another. Nor would one of few desires be dragged around by the craving of the 5 senses. One whose heart acts with few desires is always at peace and has few anxieties and misgivings. And regarding various matters, such a person feels no need for more. One always has more than enough. In a word, one with few desires is virtually in nirvana. This is what is called having few desires. It's really good to kind of put the brakes on our usual way of being and stop and consider this. What are the desires that drive us in our life day by day? Well, the big ones, wealth, sex, food and drink, sleep, and fame. So having few desires, though, can be misunderstood and can make us think that we have to denounce the material world, renounce the material world. And the attitude here in this teaching is not to make desire an enemy. Our practice is not about making anything an enemy, but rather befriending everything And what is a friend? A friend is one who you know, who knows you as you are. So we don't have to make desire an enemy, to deny it when it comes up, or to get rid of it, think that we have to get rid of it. This doesn't urge us to denounce the world, or to emphasize abstinence or self-control. Yeah, self-control. But in service to our health and happiness and our ability to contribute well-being to others in the world, to contribute something of benefit. So this can be a fruitful experiment to gather more awareness about the force of our own desire and how it's hooked to our thoughts and stimulated by the senses. So what kind of desire gets stimulated by sound? Any ideas?
Quiet.
Quiet?
Mm-hmm. There's too much sound. It's not very quiet.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. I can wish for some quiet.
Dance.
Huh?
Dance.
Dance. What kind of desire is stimulated by sight?
Attraction.
Huh?
Attraction.
Attraction,
Physical attraction.
physical attraction, sexual attraction, hunger. You know, you look at the whole advertising industry, fills us with the sight of these luscious, glistening tidbits of delicious food.
Avoidance.
Avoidance. Aversion. How about smell? What kind of desire gets elicited by smell?
Hunger.
Food.
Hunger.
Food.
Aversion.
Desire for more.
Desire for more. Taste. More. 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 This first bite was so good. I need another one. Oh, how about the whole carton? Yeah. Touch and our thoughts. These are all aspects. All the sense gates are aspects of the life force. It's how the life force manifests itself. So we don't have to blindfold ourselves. Although sometimes it's very interesting to do a dark retreat, by the way, which is something that they do up at the monastery, because they have a setting where they can completely get rid of all light. And what you can learn about your own mind when there is no visual stimulation or auditory stimulation is pretty profound. So it's not having no desire is not the end game here, but it's not wildly chasing after, which means that we can really experience freedom from desire by recognizing and discerning when it would be beneficial to pursue what comes up in the mind and when it wouldn't be. So this behavior, not wildly chasing after, dominates. We wildly chase after in addiction. And this is the realm of the hungry ghost, where you cannot get enough. There is never enough. There's momentary satiation, maybe, and then more is needed. The realm of the hungry ghost, in the 6 realms, it's one of the realms that humans migrate through And the way that hungry ghosts are pictured, and we will do a ceremony in October, Sajiki ceremony, where some of you will portray hungry ghosts. But they're pictured as beings with hugely swollen stomachs and throats that are as thin as a blade of grass, so nothing can be taken in. Nothing can be taken in to help them with their hunger. And this is the kind of thing that is kind of the basis of our civilization, is to make sure that we all behave like hungry ghosts. Always more, always more, always different. So we look at the trouble caused by countries going after more territory. And right at the moment, there's Russia and Ukraine, China and Tibet, the US and Canada and Greenland, Syria, and Israel and the West Bank. And Sudan. I mean, there are just lots and lots of situations like this. And then together, you know, that's a collectively manifested desire, and it creates dictators. We all create dictators by joining together with this endless hunger for more. So having few desires allows us to be gracious, to be modest, and to provide for others. This is the basis of the spirit of giving. Giving maybe even a little bit. No matter how little any of us have, there's always something to give. Our attention, our ability to listen, kind words. Reminds me of Barry. Some of you have heard me tell about Barry, who was a longtime member of the Heart of Wisdom in Portland. And whenever he would come, he lived on the street, and whenever he would come to the Zen Center for practice, he would bring an offering of straws that he had collected. He didn't use the straws that were given when he'd get a soda. He would collect them and bring them to the Zen Center. I was just so struck by that. There's always something. So how does having few desires strengthen our practice of wise discernment? And that's one of the things that comes with practice, is we become much more discerning because we're aware of so much more that's involved in any particular situation. So we can discern more wisely what is a true desire that leads to health, well-being, and our ability to share, and what leads away from it. The more desires we have, the more we pursue them. Thinking about this reminded me of potato chips. I have a never-ending desire for potato chips. And when this really emerged was at some point when I was doing a lot of sesshin. Whenever I would leave the monastery, I would just have to stop and get a big bag of potato chips. And I think maybe that was an attempt for my body to get more yang rather than so yin, which happens when we're sitting a lot. I don't know, but I always associate that. So what happened was, over a number of years, I decided, okay, I'm never going to buy potato chips. I'm not going to eat potato chips. If they're offered, I'll enjoy them. But if it's up to me, I'm not going to do it. Because I was just so aware of how I had practically no self-control about potato chips, which some of you may have noticed if you were at the last session. We've been putting potato chips out, and I just like every time I go by, it's part of the joy of sesshin for me. So it's really of interest to look at how does a thought and desire, how do they interact? So first, you have a thought of something. So like right now, I can feel the wanting a potato chip. And it's a pleasant thought. It brings a thought and it elicits a little sense of pleasure, a little sample internal of the sensation of pleasure. And then that's when it becomes a desire that has some push behind it. And the feeling of, I have to have it. It's just, okay. This is how helpful it is to recognize our thoughts. I mean, it's an example of why really waking up to thought, anything that is a thought, knowing it's a thought, is so helpful. Because immediately we are introduced to the possibility of choice. We have a choice. What are we going to do with this thought? Are we going to turn toward it and amplify it and become involved with it and identify ourselves with it? Or are we just going to let it do what it does if you don't pay any particular attention? It just comes and goes. So thoughts are they're like a phantom. They're apparitions. And actions are the hard facts of reality. Anything that really happens. So, taking a potato chip, that's an action. And the results of reality, or the results of thought, are like when we engage a thought, we set loose a wandering ghost that begins to gather life energy to it when we invest in our thoughts. Again, we're not saying that we shouldn't think. Of course we should think. But knowing the nature of thought and how it interacts with our actions, our speech and our mind, how it's all colored and relating together is really liberating. So, as with all things Dharma, we look into how having desires functions for benefit or for harm. And how much is what is desired useful, actually? And there's no pat answer to that. It's situational. I think of the role of desire in our civilization. And we even have now influencers. And the role of influencers is to strike up even more desire. I want to be like them. I want to have that. I want to look like that. It's influencers, and we have political influencers who give us a view that we can then take on for ourselves. So that pertains to then Sangha, because we're all influencers here. It's a view. The views that we cultivate here are hopefully very healthy and lead to well-being and lead to benefit for others. This is the Bodhisattva way, right? And the other part of realizing that we have a choice is taking on for ourselves our own power, our own power to decide and to choose. We have it. We can use it when we realize how broad and wide this power is when we discover it. So Uchiyama Roshi, becoming a very favorite person for many of us here, talks somewhere about having the eye of a true adult who takes responsibility for their actions and its consequences for the larger community. That's what this Bodhisattva way is all about. And it's also the basis of dana and unconditional giving. The way of the true adult. So he goes through some steps, some ways of reflecting. And one is this thought to be satisfied really me? What is my relationship to potato chips and the self? Is this really me? Who do I think me is? And is this necessary for my own full functioning? And then any thought is a secretion of the mind. But any of us are just a little tadpole in the great river of life, right? Of the life force. So what's the relationship of our desires to the full content of the life force that drives all of life? So these are just ways of thinking about really opening up and broadening the view, way beyond the self, the small self, the individual self. And having few desires or not pursuing the desires is allowing us to leave dissatisfaction as it is. As it is. We all feel dissatisfaction, but we don't have to do anything else but have the experience of dissatisfaction. That's one of the forms of suffering, dissatisfaction. We can use wise discernment to say, is this something I do need to attend to? Is this something that I could attend to in a way that is beneficial and doesn't create harm? So leaving dissatisfaction just as it is means having few desires leaves us free to live without illusory suffering. All the things that our desire brings us, and that whole engagement with desire in that way, giving over our life energy to the objects of desire. It's illusory suffering, it's not necessary. And so it means cultivating a way of life that's not based on suffering. That's a sentence I took from Uchiyama. I just think it's wonderful. We are, in this practice, cultivating a way of life that's not based on suffering. Yeah, I was cultivating a life that was based on suffering. I don't have to. I could base it on a life that's not based on suffering. And we have so many tools that come to us through the teachings. This developing the eye of the true adult brings me to the thought of how adolescent our culture is, really. very confused about who we are, what's important, what's healthy, and how much we appreciate true adults who are in the public eye. There are a few, not too many. So when we cultivate the eye of the true adult, we know who we are, what we can offer, actions we can take, and that we can't necessarily control the outcomes of actions that we take. So we become a model for children and for all the hungry ghosts. We can forget in the life of the Sangha that we can forget the effect that we have on the communities whose lives we touch. But every once in a while we'll have an experience where somebody who's not a practitioner says, "Wow, you seem so calm," or "Wow, you have such equanimity. How can you not get pissed off about this?" And being able to be equanimous in this crazy world is not a matter of not feeling upset or wishing it were different, but recognizing that it is the way that it is, and that we can, by holding a warm and open heart and continuing to be responsible for our own actions and our own speech, that's what we can do. That's what we can always do, no matter what's going on outside of us. So having few desires is kind of the Sangha practice for the week. Having few desires to become aware of desire when it rises up, and really be very aware about it. Is this something that has to be followed through on, or is this something that I can just pass up? This kind of inquiry really affects our relationships in many, many ways, and our consumption of stuff. So do contemplate desire in your own life and how it influences how you behave and how you experience things, the choices that you make.
Before break, 47.